everyone. We'll be getting started in just a minute. We're just waiting for folks to join the webinar. And while we're waiting, just a reminder that the webinar will be recorded and sent out to participants after the session. You can also access previous recordings of our webinars on our website at thebrooksgroup.com, and that's on the resources page. And again, we'll be getting started in just a minute. We welcome you to our session on the road again, how and will it be worth it? All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual Happy Half Hour for June 5th. Today's topic, as I just mentioned, on the road again, how and will it be worth it? As our sales reps are getting back out and attempting at least to meet their clients and prospects face to face. I'm Michelle Richardson of the Sales Performance Research Center here at the Brooks Group. I am joined, as always, by our Director of Facilitation and Coaching, Russ. This is our 11th webinar, and it's the first in our new every 2 weeks format. So thank you for joining us, and for those of you who have been with us along this journey, along the way, we welcome you back. As I mentioned earlier as well, today's webinar will be recorded and sent to participants, and you can access previous sessions on our website at thebrooksgroup.com. We're joined by Rich in the producer's seat today. He'll be posting some helpful links throughout the session today. And if you also have any technical issues with Zoom, please feel free to reach out to him directly. If you have questions throughout our session, please submit them through chat or Q&A. We will be answering questions at the end of the session, but we'll also address questions if we can throughout the webinar. So again, our topic today is on the road again, how and will it be worth it? And what does it mean for a sales team to be open for travel and face-to-face calls? And just because your sales team may be ready to get back out there, are your customers ready to get back out there? This is a frequent topic in our Brooks Sales Leadership Forum. We've been talking about this now for several weeks as we've been through the various phases of reopening. So we've talked about qualifying travel opportunities, troubleshooting issues about bringing people back into the office. And we're also talking about issues such as KPIs and whether to adjust them and how to adjust them, what to do about quotas, and what's working in lead generation. Russ, I know you're heavily involved in the forums as well. What are you seeing?
You know, this week, Michelle, we had some good conversations around the idea of what kind of unique HR issues are happening right now, particularly around personal time off and vacation time. What are the strategies and the requests that companies are making and seeking to ask their employees to support, as well as just the general idea of how creatively can you hold meetings with accounts where you're not allowed into the building, and what are your policies as companies, and then what are you expecting your customers to do? So for those who are interested, the forum, you can get more information at just sending an email to forum@thebrooksgroup.com, and actually have kind of an exciting announcement we'll talk about in the middle of the webinar about some changes that are coming to those forums here very soon. But before we do that, we are on the road again. Michelle and I were joking that you know, we need a soundtrack like Willie Nelson, or maybe the Doobie Brothers Taking It Streets, or you know, Bruce Springsteen's Jericho Road, something to kind of, you know, put us into the mood of being on the road again. But what we really want to cover today is just kind of, you know, how will your team get out there? What are the success skills that were important before in the old, what I'm calling the old normal, and today? And then give you some real ideas in terms of where as sales leaders should you be focusing your coaching, your sales meetings on to make sure that you're getting the most out of this new or next normal. So before we do that, you've given us some data through a survey this week. So Michelle, would you take us through what we learned?
Absolutely. And it's funny, we've been doing these webinars and surveys since the week of March 16th. And we've really come a long way when you talk about that sales journey and getting back on the road again. So I want to thank you all for continuing to complete these surveys. You give us the data that we need to be able to bring this information to you. So this week, one of the things that we asked was, as you send your teams back on the road, what is top of mind for you as a sales leader? And I think that big yellow word right there in the middle of that word cloud says it all. It's safety. That was the big theme. Safety for your sales teams and safety for your customers as well. So keeping up with the different rules and regulations for at least here in the States, across state lines and even across companies. So various companies and various industries are going to have different regulations for how you can meet face-to-face. Many said they were leaving it up to sales reps in terms of specifics around travel. But we're also noting some concern around how many people their salespeople should be meeting with in a day. So for instance, pre-COVID, their sales reps may have been seeing as many as 20 people in the course of a day. But how are customers going to feel now if they know your reps already been to 2 or 3 places? How are they going to feel, and are they even going to be welcome, your sales reps welcome back in the facilities? One person even indicated that they don't want to be the company that brings COVID into their customers' business. So that could be a deal killer for sure. Another issue is discerning when to make sales face-to-face sales calls or mask-to-mask calls, which I learned a new term off of our survey, and when to keep it virtual. So what's the right mix and when does it make sense to go face-to-face? And that's been a huge issue for many of our customers. How to drive sales in this environment, another big issue that's top of mind. Sales leaders don't want to be insensitive to the current environment. So finding that balance between maintaining distance and keeping contact and showing support and working the sale and getting things back up and running. With that in mind, we're also concerned about how quickly your markets are going to bounce back, getting enough appointments, concerns that maybe they won't bounce back, and then budget cuts. Budget cuts on the customer side, and this week in particular, I started hearing about budget cuts on the sales side. So obviously teams have not been traveling, and so budgets in that regard are being cut. So that's going to influence as well how teams will be able to get back out and on the road.
You know, Michelle, one of the things that we talked about in my forum was just the difference of opinions of travel right now. Mm-hmm. One of the guys had a member of his team out on the road. They'd taken an air flight. Things seemed to be pretty consistent, you know, like other than the protections, of course, pretty normal. Somebody else had a guy who traveled from East to West Coast and back. And the number one piece of advice that he gave the rest of the sales team was, if you don't have to get on an airplane, don't get on an airplane. He said there was no social distancing in the concourse. People were taking masks off. And he said every place that he called upon, so just think about every customer you go to visit or prospect, was like having an experience with TSA at the front door in terms of, you know, checking IDs, looking for temperature checks, et cetera. But a couple of the resources I just wanted to share real quickly. Both the CDC and AAA, the American Automobile Association, have good websites that talk about local traveling requirements, what's open. I've been talking to some friends who've been doing some travel with about, you know, where do you stop for the bathroom? Where do you eat? And so both of those links, which producer Rich just put into the chat, are great places to get information as your team starts to go back out on the road.
Great points, and I'm seeing the exact same thing with the organizations that I'm talking to, especially around the air travel. One person was getting back back out in flight and said that it was 50% capacity, seats were blocked off, they were practicing social distancing. Another one, different airline, saying exactly what you just said, packed, overbooked, and really no distancing. So I think it's all over the board in terms of what we're seeing, and it varies from state to state and company to company. We also asked, our respondents what kind of guidance they were providing to their sales teams as they get back on the road. And as you can see from looking at this, this particular slide, the organizations are overwhelmingly focusing their guidance on face-to-face contact with customers and prospects, more so than they are the actual travel logistics themselves. So 73% have had guidance around customer accounts, 70% around prospect accounts, getting face-to-face and some guidance there. 73% have guidance on wearing face masks. 1/3 are issuing some guidance around entertaining customers and prospects. Now this number is a little bit smaller, but I think we're still seeing some events shut down. Some restaurants are just now slowly starting to come back. So I think that's got some influence from regulations. When you start looking at actually air travel, meals in restaurants, overnight stays, rental cars, a lot of the feedback that we're getting is that companies are leaving that up to their salespeople to decide. So 30% have guidelines for international air travel, 27% for domestic, 27% on meals in restaurants, 22% on the hotel stays, and just 10% on rental cars. We had a question that came in, what percentage of companies are you talking to that are sending people back? And this particular individual is not planning to send their team back till August or September, and only if things get better. And it's mixed. At least in my experience, it's mixed. We've got, and I think we've got folks that are sending people back. I'm hearing from other organizations that are saying July. Someone else in the survey even indicated August or September as well. And I think that depends on where they're located, what industry they're in, but it is mixed. And unfortunately, I don't have any specific numbers, but there does seem to be, again, across the board. I don't know if you're seeing anything different, Russ.
I would agree with you. It would seem that from my forums and the data I've seen, probably over half of the companies have got people re-engaging at some level. But it varies based on what state you're located in. Most of them today are having their people engage via car. So they're not putting a lot of people on planes. I'd say planes is a smaller percentage. And that's for domestic air travel. International air travel, I don't know that I've talked to anyone yet who has done that. So this is going to be an evolving set of rules, I think, that we're going to see. The other thing I just wanted to say about that last slide before we move off of it, Michelle, is that what struck me about this data is that the vast majority of companies have given guidance around sort of PPE and KPIs in terms of having meetings, but they haven't really addressed the other side, the personal behavioral side of this. And I just wanted to share that this morning some fresh data was out from a poll that was published in Los Angeles Times that 58% of Americans believe that we still need to be cautious in terms of the concern for the virus out there. And I would encourage you as a sales manager, even if your organization is not doing it, have some conversations to understand what your teams are comfortable with or concerned about. And just as we've all had sort of office playbooks to go back into the offices, those of us who are back in offices, you may need to consider a similar sort of thing for people back out on the road. It may be a special set of travel policies that fits with just kind of what we know as it's opening up. And your people might really appreciate that.
And that is a great point. You know what, again, organizations that we've been talking to and sales leaders, they're across the board. They've got reps that are dying to get back out there on the road. And then they've got other reps who are extremely cautious. And so to have some guidance and some parameters, some qualification around being able, you know, when does it make sense and what are the guidelines and what are appropriate, some consistency would definitely be helpful. So the other question that we asked that we want to share with you today is that other than health, what concerns you as a sales leader? So what are the burning issues other than the health of your team? Personal motivation. So getting people out, restarting routines after so much time at home, getting back into the habits that optimize productivity and schedules. I was talking to one sales leader this week, and he said as his market is opening up, he's concerned that he's going to actually lose some of the efficiencies that he gained while his team was in quarantine. So that rush to get back out on the road, to drive 3 hours for one sales call and drive back, as opposed to really showing that discernment as to when virtual might be better. Also, adjusting sales strategy to be more sensitive to price, competition, budgets. Price pressure is something that we talked about a few weeks ago in one of the webinars. We know that everyone has been impacted to some extent. Some of you are doing better than others. But we understand that organizations are becoming more price sensitive. So how do you work with your teams to not immediately have that panic response to pricing pressure? How do you get them out prospecting? And for those that have been used to cold calling in person, we had one respondent note that, drop-in visitors are not going to be welcome in 2020. So what does that look like then in terms of lead generation and refilling the pipeline? Changing customer habits, their buying habits, kind of along those same lines, understanding how decision processes may have changed, how buying contacts may have changed, another big issue. And really just confidence in getting either back on a plane or getting back out in the road and travel and knowing they're going to be fine. I know personally, the first few times I ventured outside, once quarantine started to be lifted and some of the restrictions, it was odd. I think we all kind of got used to being on lockdown. So those are really the big issues that are on the minds of our sales leaders.
And Michelle, I just want to jump on that last one. This is a perfect slide, just leave it here. But, you talked about the buying habits and the buying pattern of customers. One of the things we're seeing research on, and we talked about in the sales forum this week, is how is the buying process changing with customers? Are they moving it up, bringing more senior people? Some decisions we're seeing are made much faster. They're more closely aligned with the critical mission of the organization. Some are being made much slower. And we also talked a little bit about, as decisions are made at higher levels, do your salespeople have the skills to go in and have those conversations? I think one of the groups, it wasn't anyone in mind, it just said, well, I just told my people, go call on senior leaders. And again, if you haven't prepped and you're not asking the right kind of questions, you can create more harm than good. So those are the kinds of topics we cover in the Brooks Sales Leadership Forum. I'm kind of excited to announce that we are moving in a couple of weeks to what we're calling the Sales Leadership Forum 2.0, where, now that people are back on the road, weekly sessions are too much for people. So we're going to meet at a different cadence so we can go deeper. But we're still going to have that key element of peers being able to talk to peers, where you can bring the issues you're facing, ask questions, hear what other people are doing, and get real direct feedback from those folks. So if you're interested in joining or getting more information, again, forum at thebrooksgroup.com. We'd love to have you be around as we start this 2.0 version of the Sales Leadership Forums. Another thing that we're doing right now are some workshops. Michelle, I think you've got one about increasing your close rates when you're selling at social distance.
Exactly. We were just talking about price pressure, selling value, having those conversations, and coming up on June 18th, the next workshop in our Selling at Social Distance series called Virtual Recommendations That Win Business. So we know that we're not quite able to get out face-to-face 100% right now. So really increasing those virtual selling skills, making every presentation count. When you have fewer opportunities, you want to make every one of them count. So learning how to build a solid foundation, present options while still keeping that value, knowing when to talk price, and best practices for following up. So it's a 90-minute workshop conducted virtually. It's going to be on June 18th. Learn how to make those virtual recommendations with high impact and compelling solutions, learning how to overcome objections, manage those objections in a virtual environment, and refine and develop the attributes and nuances of a virtual presentation. So if you'd like more information on that webinar, and email us at webinar webinar@thebrooksgroup.com, and Rich will put that information up in the chat box as well. That's webinar@thebrooksgroup.com, and that is on June 18th.
All right. Well, let's look at some recommendations then. We've had a couple of questions come in, and I was just kind of looking at those. And we'll get to both of those questions as we go through the flow of this. But if you do have questions, we'd love to be able to have you share those through the Q&A, and we'll make sure they get answered. We are on the road again. The economy has been open for anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks, kind of from where you are. And I think everybody, but especially salespeople, are eager to get back to normal. But as a result, what we're seeing is some habits show up. And as Augmendino mentioned there, quote, wrong habits or bad habits can lead us to failures. And one of the things that we're seeing is that some of the things that have helped us in productivity or building trust over the last few months are disappearing. So let me just hit a couple of the bad habits, maybe 4 of them. Number 1, hub and spoke travel. Michelle's already talked about the fact that people, just because they can get face-to-face, are going face-to-face. And instead of multiple appointments per day, they're believing that, if they're willing to meet with me, I'm willing to go. While that's always an issue in the people that we train from a selling perspective, it's even more significant now, especially if a salesperson feels hampered by virtual and they want to get face-to-face. So watch as your folks start to travel that they're really making calls that make sense. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Rushing for revenue, or this idea of revenue at any cost. And that can come either from management down or from their personal needs for cash flow up. McKinsey recently published a report on some of the outcomes. This was a June 2nd report. And they said, this idea of balancing cash flow, meaning get a deal at any price, and profitability on those deals is tricky. Some companies are pushing very hard for inventory to cash, or just to get revenue to keep cash coming in the door. But a month of your sales team going out and dropping a lot of quotes at either no margin or very low gross margin have pain to go over the next very many months. And I think one of the keys here that we're seeing from some of the things that I've been reading is that the way in which you as sales leaders message your people and what kind of trust level you have a really important here. Do you trust your team to be able to deliver a message that says, we need to be focused, we need to be intense, but we don't need to be panicked? And so let's bring back some sense of what are the good business decisions we need to make here. And the challenge for you is, how do you deliver that message in the right way, that it's both a call to be very sincere and it's an urgent time. It's not a time to lose and make crazy deals. One of the other things that McKinsey says is it's really important leaders right now balance hope and realism. And you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure you're on the page, so that as they a gulf to between management and rank and file. And one of the things they recommend is it may be a time for a little more transparency. Maybe a time that if you don't want to release full P&L numbers, you at least talk about percentage in terms of what it's going to take to get back to break even, or give them a sense that every month are starting to grow again, you're extending that runway of how much cash is in the business, and therefore how long the business can continue. Number 2, competitors. We always believe, I think sometimes, that competitors are more aggressive than we believe. I know when I talk to companies, they'll say, well, we're making all these mistakes, but our competitors have strategic vision. They execute flawlessly, and they pay all their salespeople better than we pay our people. But the reality is our competitors are more like we are than we want to believe. And so don't think that just because we're going back out there, your competitor is in every account. I did training one time for an organization that, as we talked about it, we discovered that all of the salespeople believed that every client had seen a lower cost competitor, and therefore every bid they did went in at the lower price. And I'm not exaggerating. I know you're not supposed to use the word every or always, but that's what they told me. And so we just taught them the simple habit of just ask the question of your prospect, what have you seen that you liked? And see if they'll talk about being in front of a competitor. And if not, you've got the opportunity there to set the agenda. They're going to evaluate companies and not have to drop your price in that same way. And then the last two around rushing for revenue and fear of competitors, both of those have this sense that the sale must be accelerated. I got to get it done faster. And the reality is that the faster you go by pushing too hard actually slows down. Your prospect may be asking, why are they pushing so hard? Are they desperate? I don't want to do business with a desperate account. So slow down, understand. We'll talk about in a minute. The last thing I wanted to say here before we move on was this was a phrase that came up again in our sales forums about random acts of sales. And I think it's great, or excuse me, it came out of the survey. And it's great because under stress, we are not our best selves. We know that individually, that happens with teams, it happens with organizations. And so any kind of weaknesses we've had are magnified at this particular time. Someone told me that one of the challenges they're seeing in this new world is even when their people get a prospect and go out and have a conversation, they're slow to follow up, which you would think, gee, there's no reason for that today. We've all got, fewer prospects and more time than we should have. So anyway, those are the bad habits we're seeing. Don't let your organization fall into sort of bad random acts of sales. So what are the things you told us that are most important? These top four, by the way, are good habits in the normal of face-to-face, in the current normal of mask-to-mask, or even in the virtual world. Number one, it takes patience to be able to understand a prospect's needs. And so rather than going to generic selling right now where everything looks the same, you want to make sure that you slow down and really ask good questions, understand what it is they're looking for. We call this the probe step as it relates to impact, and it's where discovery occurs. So you can work with your teams in your sales meetings or other things. What questions are you asking right now? What are you learning? Learn if they're open-ended and if they're getting a broader response or a single yes or no. Under pressure, most salespeople will result to closed-in questions, single words, and really some bad habits where they're not learning what the customer wants. They're just working through a checklist that says, oh yes, this is a qualified prospect, so now I should put a proposal in front of them. Number two is some around qualifying. Don't confuse a willingness to talk with a willingness to buy. Not every seen tomorrow. And so start just encouraging you. If they can't do, instead of a hub and spoke where you move from where you are out to see one customer and back, think about, is there a chance that if you set up that meeting for 4 days from now, you could get a second meeting? So at least now you're doing two spokes, I guess you would call that, as opposed to one. So practice some of those. Look at your KPIs that you set. We're seeing people who are sales leaders are changing from number of physical meetings, just total touches, whether it's via voice, video, or face-to-face. And to make that your KPIs are not driving your reps to make bad decisions. One of the questions that was about global markets and the fact that they don't have good infrastructure for video. They maybe even can't do phone calls. Text messages are expensive. One of the things that I've seen and done very successfully selling in parts of the world is what their dominant app is. Whether communications app in India and a lot of the world, it's WhatsApp, for example. We have a facilitator in Brazil. He communicates frequently with that. In China, it is something, I'm drawing a blank on it right now, but there are applications where the communication costs are high that I can almost guarantee your customers are using to talk to their peers. And if you can find that, you have the ability to pass video, you can pass links, you can do text messaging. In some cases, you can even do calls. Thank you, Kevin. WeChat is the application in China. So find out what works for your particular client between WhatsApp or WeChat or Skype, and you can find cost-effective ways to be able to do that. Prospecting, always important. As you can see there, number 3 is find and initiate new conversations. We are hearing some companies who are reserving face-to-face meetings only for new opportunities because they think that's the way they need to be able to get there. We have one person in our leadership forum. I love this story. It was the idea of the CEO that they buy an RV and they drive it from location to location. They said, if we can't get into the customer's office, we're going to bring the office to the customer. And they've got it branded with their logos and things. Again, won't work for everyone, but might be the right place if you have a local territory and something like that works. And then the last one is all around just focusing the business meeting. How do we get it to be really focused on the business that people want to talk about? Our surveys have shown that small talk, that the kind of casual conversation that opens a meeting, is something that only about a quarter of all prospects want to hear. And it becomes even more important now that people have the ability to read the behavior of the prospect, figure out what they're looking for, because meetings are shorter, they may be held outdoors. The buyers are in the office for fewer days a week, so they have to accomplish more. You've got to be able to have that transition. If you've been through impact training, we use something called a statement of intention that allows you to communicate in a very short statement the objective of the meeting in terms of the value to the prospect. And it's the thing you can go over as you go through the training. And then finally, what are some things that sales leaders should focus on? I want to give you 9 quick things, and I know that's a lot, but I'm going to bounce them off you anyway. First of all, your questioning strategy, whether you're asking open-ended questions, whether you've got a solid customer-oriented statement of intention, all focus on pre-call planning. If there was one thing I would encourage you to do right now is really work with your people on pre-call planning. Make the point in class that, I'll ask the people in my sales says, how many of you would want to be on Drew Carey's or whoever is running it now? Whose line is it anyways? Who wants to do improv comedy? And the answer is nobody ever wants to do it. And yet that's what they do when they walk into a sales call cold. Planning only a few minutes, maybe we say 5 minutes a call, but it's important that you make sure you do that. It's important now that you've been reaching out with empathy, that you don't drop back into immediately hard selling, but that you're able to ask questions with smart intentionality that came from a forum participant, where you understand situationally what you're facing. Where's their company? Where's the contact at? Where are you at from a delivery perspective? I know we had a question around demand outstripping supply. You've got to be sensitive to all of those things as you have a meeting, that you understand what are the questions they're going to ask. Nobody likes to be on allocation. It's a horrible situation, especially for frontline salespeople. It happens from time to time. So be honest, open, and communicate. We've already talked about qualifying. You can see that I think it's important. I mentioned it 5 times. Make sure you're working on the best opportunities, not only before you travel, but just with the time that you have. And then the last one is make sure you're using the right medium for the message. If virtual makes sense, go virtual. If travel makes sense, travel. I love the concept that someone gave me in a class one time that as a salesperson, we should always think in terms of billable hours. I know attorneys do and accountants do, but you only have so many hours in the day. And are you doing the things that generate revenue with those minutes, or how often do you not use your time or think about your time in that way? And then the last one is be ready to iterate. Muscle memory, people are going to fall back into bad habits. Patrick Lencioni has done some measurements in terms of the loss of productivity as people have started to move back into the office because we're not as focused on meetings. We tend to get more focused to email for some reason. So make sure you're talking now to not lose what's gone. Be listening for what's happening in real time as close as you can, whether that's through social media or whether it's getting information every day or every week from your sales teams. You need to be hearing what customers are saying because that's going to change as well. If your customers aren't buying, we've mentioned this before, look for the triggers. What do they believe will be the things that need to happen before they start moving forward with purchases again? Take the time to ask. They want and typically will tell you. Make sure you're reviewing losses. This is in most organizations I've worked with, a very weak muscle in terms of the kind of folks we consult with. They don't do thorough loss analysis. They'll typically say, well, we lost because of price or our price was too high. I find that that's rarely the only answer. It's never the only answer and rarely the most important answer. So dig into it. If you've been professional to this point as a sales rep, you can go back to your buyers and say, help me understand what I can do better next time because I want to do business with you in the future. And let your buyers talk to you and coach you a little bit on where you're going to go. And then finally, KPIs and goals are becoming very short-term. They're focused on maybe this month or a couple of months or a quarter. A lot of people have not had their annual numbers reset yet. In fact, I think that's the vast majority of folks that I've talked to. On the other hand, they're giving their reps short-term focus. They're maybe running short-term contests or bonuses based on the next month or couple of months, trying to make sure that they're driving the right kind of behaviors through their organizations. All those things in the second part around iterate are going to be harder for sales managers. It's more work for you to do. But at the same time, as I said before, right now I think is the most difficult time for all of us as sales leaders and business leaders as we move back into this world. So those are kind of the quick thoughts that I have. I know I went through those quickly. I get accused of trying to always squeeze too much in, and I do. I apologize for that. But let us know what you have as questions. What are the things that you'd like to know? Chat or Q&A us. If you have a story from your own travels as you've opened up that you think would be beneficial to people, we'd love to hear it now. So go ahead and just take a minute. Let us know what's happening in your world as life starts to reopen. I see we've got one participant who's raised their hand, but and I appreciate that from voting for something we may have said, but if there's something else you'd like, either chat it or Q&A.
And as Russ mentioned, while we're giving you a minute to put your questions in, share stories about what you're seeing. So our next webinar will be on June 19th, and it will be Tales from the Road. So we're on the road again this week. Next time it will be Tales from the Road, the new sales journey. So what we really want to do is explore the issues that you're seeing as your teams get back out, on the road. So things like, how are you handling vacation time and KPIs? Are you seeing that decision processes are changing? Are they getting higher in the organization? How are your teams adapting? So these are the things that we'll be looking at on June 19th. We'll have another survey that goes out this coming Monday, so please watch for that. We would love all participation because that's how we get our data to bring this information to you.
And Michelle, we are past our half hour, although most people don't mind stretching a happy hour just a little bit. I know a lot of people rush in right at the end and order drinks, but let's go ahead and just kind of answer these questions as people type in any more comments or questions. Watch out for bad habits. They will reemerge or they will still exist, particularly around travel and around what's the value in the account. Focus your team on pre-call planning. Make sure that they have the right questioning strategy and good questions. They've got the right statement of intention. They're being smart in terms of how they ask those, and qualify. I think the number one question a sales leader can ask someone is, why should they buy from us? And really ask, don't get just the standard answers, but in this particular account, why are they going to buy from us? And dig in that. And it'll help you understand how deep your rep is going in qualifying, and will help make sure they qualify more the next time. And then be ready to, if things are going to change as we go forward. Had a comment come in that I appreciate. It's budgets are tightening because people had rough first quarters, or they anticipate a bad overall second quarter. I think in general, numbers in April were the worst, that were the low point, if you will, in what we've seen. And we are seeing that based on industries. Some industries are going like gangbusters. Some are very tough. And if you're one of tough industries, again, as we've talked about in past webinars, stay close to your clients, understand kind of where they are, as close as you can be to the critical mission of what they're trying to accomplish, the more likely you are to be able to win and get business. Another one came in, a comment that they've been on the road. Lack of food has been an issue, especially in airports. Some people are not as cautious as they are, so you're seeing this mix of masks and no masks, or shaking hands and not shaking hands. Again, every place you visited had very strict protocols around safety, and I think that's normal. So thanks, Daniel, for that comment and affirming what we're seeing. I will be on the road before our next webinar, so I'll be able to bring my own live stories from the road.
All right, I think that is it for the questions and comments. So thank you very much for joining us. Again, if you are interested in our Sales Leadership Forum, email us at forum@thebrooksgroup.com. Our next virtual workshop on June 18th, you can email us at webinar@thebrooksgroup.com, and we will see you on June 19th. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.